Usually, before Yom Tov, if the time allows, meaning to say is the Mesechta ends and we have a few weeks, we try to pick a topic in Yana D'Yoma. It's interesting, we're starting now Mesechta's Moed Katan. The beginning of the Mesechta speaks about Hilchas Hamoed. We're just coming off Hamoed, Pesach. The next Hamoed is Sukkot. Though I do want to say, very interesting, in the old prints of the Rambam, there's a toyus atvus, there's a mistake. The Rambam, after Hilchas Mila, the Rambam has a siddur. The Rambam lists, when the Rambam speaks about Hamoed, the Rambam says that in Yal v'Yavoy, Yisei b'yoyim, Chagamatzah says on Hamoed. So the Rambam says, "B'choyle shal Moed, oy b'yoyim mikra kodesh hazeh b'yoyim Moed Chagamatzah hazeh, oy b'yoyim Moed Chag HaShavuos hazeh." But that's a mistake. There's no Hamoed Shavuos. Though the Ramban says that the days now between Pesach and Shavuos is Hamoed, Ki choyle shal Moed, the Lashon Ramban. V'hayomim hasvurim bentayim between Pesach and Hamoed, and Pesach and Shavuos, Ki choyle shal Moed, like the first days and last days of Yom Tov. Interesting to know, just on the general concept of Hamoed, Hamoed are days that are sandwiched between two Yomim Tovim, and that's what gives it a Kedusha more than a regular day. The Maharal says, he's not speaking about the Kedushas Hamoed, but he's speaking about the Isser Chometz, still coming off Pesach. He says that the first year when we went out of Mitzrayim, the Isser Chometz was only the first day. Just the first day. There was no Isser Chometz, only the first day. Why? Because after the first day Pesach, there was no more Yom Tov. Pesach was one day, till we came to the Yom Tov, and there was Kriyas Yom Tov, and there was a seventh day of Yom Tov. The middle days became sandwiched, and that's the same idea like Rabbi Hamoed also, that Hamoed comes about when it's days in between the first and the last days of Yom Tov, these Kedushas Hamoed. And of course, that's why Shavuos, we don't have Hamoed, there's no first and last days. B'toyres Hakdama, we're starting to learn Mesechta's Moed Katan. The first chelik of Moed Katan speaks about the halachas Hilchas Hamoed. Hilchas Hamoed is relatively complex, not to scare anybody off, but just to understand that just like it says in Hilchas Yom Tov, that everything is like Shabbos, it's aser until you know what's mutter. The same idea with Hamoed also. A person cannot assume that Hamoed is mutter, but you have to check up. Could be there's some things to be machmar on Hamoed. The opposite, Hamoed be'etzem has a kedusha, it's bedoimet to Yom Tov. However, whatever the halachas are in Yom Tov, Hamoed is even more kal. Like the Mishnah Brura, the beginning of Hilchas Hamoed, beginning of Chelik Vav, the Mishnah Brura starts off, there are 5 general klolim of Haterim in Hilchas Hamoed. So I want to speak a little bit for a few minutes today, general, the Chaim of Kedushas Hamoed. The Mishnah in Avos, the Mishnah says, Perek Gimel Mishnah Yud Aleph, sagt the Mishnah, Hamavazes Amayados. We'll soon see what it means. Hamavazes Amayados, Ein Loi Chelik Lo'ilam Haba. It's not just, if a person is Mavazes Amayados, he's Mavazes Amayados, Ein Loi Chelik Lo'ilam Haba. The Gemara in Sanhedrin, Tzadik Tes Amar Aleph, the Gemara says the same, and the Gemara says, Afal Pi Sheyesh B'Yodoi, Toiro Maisim Toivim, is still Ein Loi Chelik Lo'ilam Haba. And the Gemara in Pesachim, Daf Kuf Yud Ches, as well as the Gemara in Makis, the Gemara says a little bit different. The Mishnah and the Gemara in Sanhedrin say, Ein lechelik leilam haba. The Gemara in Pesachim says, V'omer Reb Sheshes, B'shum Reb Lezer ben Azariah, Kol ha-mevazes ha-ma'ades kilu oiver avodah zara. So let's try to take it apart. What does mevaza mean? And what is moyadis? What is it referring to? So we'll start first with the second part. Ha-mevazes ha-moyadis. What is ha-mevazes ha-moyadis? Moyadis meaning to say what? So many of the Rishonim, Rashi on the Mishnah of Avos, in the Gemara, when the Gemara brings Mesechta Avos, there's Rashi over there. Rashi, as well as Rashi in Sanhedrin, the Rashbam on Pesachim, because the Gemara is in Pesachim, Daf Kuf Yud Ches, there's no Rashi, it's Rashbam. And the Rav, all the Rishonim all explain that it's going on Chol Hamoed. Ha-mevazes ha-moyadis means, which we'll see soon, how is the person mevazah Rachman al-Tzon, but ha-moyadis means Chol Hamoed. The Rambam, however, does not learn that it's going on Chol Hamoed. The Rambam learns that it's going on Yom Tif. Where does the Rambam learn that it's going on Yom Tif? All the Rishonim that I just mentioned now are mefarish the Mishnah, the Gemara, when it says ha-moyadis pirush Chol Hamoed. Where does the Rambam say that it's going on Yom Tif? The Rambam in Hilchos Yom Tif, when speaking about Yom Tif, and the Rambam says that Yom Tif dinoi keshabbos, like Abi Kovid Oinig, that's not the discussion now, but the Rambam says that Yom Tif is bedoima to Shabbos. Says the Rambam, after saying these halachas, kashem shemitzvah lachabet Shabbos ula'anga kach kol yom tovim, says the Rambam, v'chol hamevazes hamoyados ki'ilu nitva l'avodah zara. The Rambam brings this din of hamevazes hamoyados in the halach of Hilchos Yom Tif. I'm not saying Hilchos Yom Tif because it's in the chelik of Rambam of Hilchos Yom Tif, because in this halach he's speaking about Hilchos Yom Tif, and he says hamevazes hamoyados ein l'chelik ki'ilu nitva l'avodah zara. Shevet Halevi, Rab Vosner says that that's what the Rambam is referring to, Yom Tif. So far we have over here Machlokes Rishonim. If when the Gemara says Hamevazes hamoyados is referring to Chol Hamoed, that's the pashtus in many Rishonim. The Rambam learns Hamevazes hamoyados is referring to Yom Tif. In the Torah Tamima, he brings two rayas, or call it a smach, a reason why Hamevazes hamoyados is referring to Chol Hamoed. Number one, he says, because in the Gemara, one of the Gemaras, the Gemara says Hamevazes hamoyados kilu avodah zara. The Gemara brings a pasuk. That exact same pasuk in a Gemara in Chagiga that we just finished, we made a siyum. The Gemara in Chagiga brings that pasuk and learns that the pasuk is referring to Chol Hamoed. The pasuk is Chag HaMatzos Tishmar. So the Gemara in Chagiga says Lomu Ba'im Berishon Meshvi. So the Gemara says Haloi Bo Elo Lahaza Chol Hamoed. That's the pasuk that the Gemara brings when saying Hamevazes hamoyados. So seemingly, if you want to know what Moed means, does Moed mean Yom Tov or Chol Hamoed? Says that the Torah Tamima, I would say it's Chol Hamoed, because the Gemara in Chagiga, when bringing this pasuk, says it's talking about Chol Hamoed. Another smach and reason to say why we're referring to Chol Hamoed rather than Yom Tov, as the Taisus Yom Tov on our Mishnah, when the Mishnah begins, Mashkin Beis Hashalchen b'Moed. Yeah, beginning of Moed Katan, we just started it this week. Mashkin Beis Hashalchen b'Moed. So the Rambam Pirush HaMashnayos, right here on the page, the Taisus Yom Tov brings it, and he says the following: Yom Tov is referred to in Chazal in the Mishnah in the Gemara as Regel or Chag. Mash'enkin Chol Hamoed is referred to as Moed. When it says over here, Mashkin Beis Hashalchen b'Moed, of course it doesn't mean Yom Tov, it means Chol Hamoed. The Rambam Pirush HaMashnayos says that you should know, klal that when it says Moed, the Mishnah and the Gemara, Moed is referring to Chol Hamoed. What'd you say? 1 second, very good, 1 minute. Mela says the Torah Tamima that when the Gemara says Mavazas Hamayados, it's referring to Chol Hamoed. Yitzchak is asking a good question, Taka, a good question. This is the Rambam saying the klal. So we have a kasha on the klal because Mavazas Hamayados, the Rambam learns as Yom Tov. It's a good question, but to answer your question partially, we're going to get to it soon, that the Rambam had to actually learn it's going on Yom Tov, not Chol Hamoed. We'll get to it shortly, because really, you could ask a little more, even without the Rambam L'Shitasei. We see that it's pretty clear that Hamayadis is referring to Chol Hamoed. Most of the Rishonim learn like that, and we said 2 reasons why Taka would the Rambam say differently. So we'll get to that momentarily. So far, we have most of the Rishonim learned that Mavazas and Ma'adis is talking about Chol Hamoed. How is one being Mavaza? So Rashi in Avos, the Rashbam and Pesachim says that it's talking about Sha'oisa Malacha. And that's why I'm giving this Shiur Hakdama as we're starting to learn Mesechta Moed Katan with Malachas on Chol Hamoed, what's mutter and what's aser. Hamavazas and Ma'adis means that a person does Malacha on Chol Hamoed, is what the Mishnah says, in L'chelak L'olam Haben Ki Lo Ovid Avodah Zarah. Rabbi Yoina as well on the Mishnah of it says the same. Avaz as Ma'adis means Sha'oisem Malacha B'Chol Hamoed. And Dr. Rabbi Yoina, we just mentioned a minute ago why Ma'adis is Chol Hamoed. It's talking about Moed, not Yom Tov. Rabbi Yoina says a little more. We're learning that Mavazes and Ma'adis means you're doing Malacha. Obviously, it's talking about Chol Hamoed. Why? Because doing malacha on Yom Tov, for that you don't have to say Ein L'chelak L'olam Haba. What do you mean? If a person does is Machal Shabbos Ein L'chelak L'olam Haba, I mean the Torah Avada Machal Shabbos, Machal Yom Tov. Chol Hamoed, which is somewhat gray, and when I say gray is, once we get into halachas, we'll see some things are mutter, some things are aser. Even when it's aser, these are teirem. So over here, there's what to say. Hamavazas Hamayadis tahani do malach on Chol Hamoed. Yom Tov, Mayadis wouldn't mean Yom Tov because Yom Tov it's not. You don't need the Mishnah and the Gemara to say in the L'chelak L'olam Haba. We'll see soon how the Rambam does learn. L'chayr, then it's a kasha on the Rambam, because the Rambam says Hamavazas Hamayadis is going on Yom Tov. So what's going on over here? If it's going on Yom Tov, then l'chayra, you don't need, like what we just said now, you don't need a Mishnah, a Gemara to tell us. Oh, V'oid says Rabbeinu Yoina, that it says Hamavazes Hamayadis. If it's talking about Yom Tov, first of all, you don't need a Gemara. V'oid, if somebody does malacha on Yom Tov, that's called mevaza. That's not called mevaza. That's called mechalel Yom Tov. So what's hamavaza samayadis? If it's talking about doing malacha on Yom Tov, then you're mechal Yom Tov. You're not mevaza Yom Tov. You're mevaza also, but it's way more than mevaza. Mechal. So maybe let's talk about Chol Hamoed. What's taka the pshat that it's so chamer that if a person does malacha, it's ki'ilu oived avodah zarah. Avad, it's aser, but it's ki'ilu oived avodah zarah. What's the pshat? What's taka the pshat that when a person does malacha and Chol Hamoed, it's not just the avla, it's not just the iser, it's not just an aveir, it's ki'ilu oived avodah zarah. So the Maral in Kedushas Agadas and Mesechta Makas explains the following. He says Moed is like Maloshem v'noyadati. V'noyadati Moed. Tisha B'Av is Ikri Moed. They say the pshat because that's a time that you connect with the Rabbeinu Shalom, even though it's a sad time. Moed Yom Tov is a time to connect with the Rabbeinu Shalom. It's a time you daven. It's a time of avoid in the Beis Hamikdash. Last month we spoke about Oile Regel, Karbonos. It's a time to connect, avoid, get closer to the Rabbeinu Shalom. That's Yom Tov. Memela and Chol Hamoed as well. If a person goes and does malacha, he's saying, I'm actually not interested in the meeting Chas v'Shalom with the Rabbi Shalom. I have other things that are more important. I need to do work. The Meila Zok the Maral, that's why it's Ki'ilu Ovid Avodah Zarah. The Pshat is he's something more important than the Eivashta. Yom Tov Chol Hamoed, as is Mavur in the Yerushalmi, that Chol Hamoed was given to be Oisek B'Torah. The Pshat is to be Oisek, getting closer to Rabbi Shalom. And a person goes and he does Malacha. So for that's why it's called Ki'ilu Ovid Avodah Zarah. Of course, Avada these halachas and these times, then it's mutter. When it's mutter, it's mutter. It's not Ki'ilu Ovid Avodah Zarah. But a person has to know the halachas properly, and it's okay if a person doesn't know the halachas to ask what's mutter, what's aser. The Heterim, Davar Avid, Tzarech Harabim, these many Heterim, Oichel Nefesh, it's mutter, we're going to get through it, we're going to go through it, Be'ez Hashem. But that's why it's Nechshav Ki'ilu Ovid Avodah Zarah. Just speaking about the Chaimer of doing Malacha and knowing the halachas, Hilchas Chol Hamoed, the Yesod V'Shorish Avodah says the following: Yizara Adam Moed B'Asiyas Malacha. Person should be very careful in doing Malacha and Chol Hamoed. Af b'Malacha Kala, even doing a small Malacha, which could seem very simple. Ya'ayin b'Mekodim b'Shulchan Aruch. Or Yishal le'ezim moira, to ask a Rav if you're allowed or not. And mutal l'sakin zeh b'Chol Hamoed aloi. There's things that might seem very aser, and it's mutter. And these things that are, what's the big deal? It's almost nothing, and it's aser. So a person has to know the halachas. And then he continues, he actually says it early, he says, Ve'echla yechrad leva adam basiyas malacha b'chol hamoed. How would a person not be afraid? A person has to be careful, shlo yiyeh ka'ovid avodah zarah k'koifa be'eker. So far we learned that Oisem Malacha B'Chol Hamoed, Mavazas Ha'Ma'adas means you're Oisem Malacha B'Chol Hamoed. We saw that the Rambam learns that Mavazas Ha'Ma'adas is not talking about Chol Hamoed, it's talking about Yom Tov. And we'll soon see what the Rambam does understand, what it's referring to. L'chayra can't be talking about Malacha, because then it's not called Hamavaza, it's called Hamachalol. And you don't need a Gemara, a Mishnah to say Ki'ilu Ovid Avodah Zarah. I mean, Avada. If a person's Mechal Shabbos, he's Mechal Shabbos. He's Mechal Yom Tov, he's Mechal Yom Tov. Why didn't the Rambam learn Kepshute like all the other Rishonim that it's talking about doing Malacha and Chol Hamoed? Explains the Be'er Sheva. And he says the following, that it's Mitlatali in the Machlokes Rishonim, the fundamental machlokes rishonim, that this is also important to know going into Mesechta Moed Katan. These are machlokes rishonim. If the Isser Malacha on Chol Hamoed is a Isser D'Oraisa or a Isser D'Rabbanan. The Bir Allah in the beginning of Hilchas Chol Hamoed brings a big list. Some rishonim hold, many rishonim hold that it's the Raisa. On the other side hold that it's the Rabbanan. There's actually a third sheet that we're not going to go into now. But these machlokes rishonim of doing malacha on Yom Tov, on Chol Hamoed, is a deraisa or a issa derabanan? Says the Be'er Sheva, Rashi l'shitasai, the Rashbam l'shitasai hold that the issa malacha on Chol Hamoed is a issa deraisa. Rashi is in Moed Katan Daf Yud Aleph, we'll get to it. Daf Yud Aleph over here. The Rashbam is actually, as we're going to see in a minute, Tosfos brings this Rashbam, Tosfos and Chagiga. They hold that the Isser Malacha on Chol Hamoed, when you're not allowed to do Malacha, is the Isser Deraisa. Therefore, it's possible to say that if you're Oisem Malacha B'Chol Hamoed, Hamavazas Ha'Ma'adas means doing Malacha and Chol Hamoed, because it's the Isser Deraisa. But if you learn that doing Malacha on Chol Hamoed is only a Issa D'Rabbanan, so could you say that it's Ki'ilu Ovid Avodah Zarah? It's taka, you shouldn't be doing it, but it's an Ovid Avodah Zarah? The Rambam in Perek Vav of Hilchas Yom Tov says that doing malacha and Hamoed is only a issa d'Rabbanan. Perek Zayin, Halacha Aleph, Choilish Hamoed, Afal Pishin Enema by Shabbosayin, Hayal Mikra Kodesh, V'ha'oise by Malacha Ha'asura, says the Rambam, Makan Oise Makas Mardus. You don't get Malkas. It's Mepnei Shi Surei Midrabanan. The Isser is the Isser Midrabanan. Memela, the Rambam that learns that to do Malacha on Hamoed is only a Isser D'Rabbanan. The Rambam was not able to learn that Amavaza Samoy Ados is talking about doing Malacha on Hamoed. Because doing Malacha on Hamoed it's an Isser, but it's an Isser D'Rabbanan. So for Isser D'Rabbanan, it's Ki'ilu Oivir Avodah Zarah. So Mamela, the Rabbi had to go that it's talking about something else, not Oisa Malacha B'chai Moed. Not to get lost, not to get confused, most Rishonim learn that Abavazas and Ma'adas means Oisa Malacha B'chai Moed. You do Malacha and Chalamoed, and it's understood because he's an Issa D'Oraisa to do Malacha and Chalamoed. The Rambam was not able to learn like that because for an Issa D'Rabbanan, you can't say Ki'ilu Oivir Avodah Zarah. However, the Magen Avram, right here in the beginning of Hilchas Chalamoed, right in the beginning, Taf Kof Lamed is where it starts. The beginning of Chelik Vav starts Hilchas Chalamoed. The first Magen Avram, the Magen Avram says Machlokes if it's D'Oraisa or D'Rabbanan, but says the Magen Avram, regardless if it's D'Oraisa or D'Rabbanan, Oinshei Chomer, Oinshei Gadol, it means over here Ki'ilu Oivir Avodah Zarah, and even if it's an Issa D'Rabbanan, which means not like what we just said, even if it would be Issa D'Rabbanan, it's still Ki'ilu Oivir Avodah Zarah. And the Machzah Shekel, Pirush on the Magen Avram asks, he's bothered. He says, how could you learn that if it's an Issa D'Rabbanan, it's Ki'ilu Oivir Avodah Zarah? Tosfos says that the Shitas HaRashbam is that Issa Malacha is D'Oraisa. How does he know that? Because from this Rashbam and Psachim, that the Rashbam says that Hamavazas and Ma'adas Ki'ilu Oivir Avodah Zarah is talking about Oisa Malacha B'chal Hamoed. Al Karchach it's D'Oraisa. Tosfos already says that I know that the Rashbam holds that the Issa Malacha on Chal Hamoed is D'Oraisa from this that he teaches Hamavazas and Ma'adas. So he's matche if D'Oraisa, if Midoraisa, if it's Issa D'Oraisa, it's Ki'ilu Oivir Avodah Zarah. If it's Issa D'Rabbanan, it's also very Chomer. So just to sum up so far, we're almost at the end. Most of the Rishonim hold that the Isser Malacha is D'Oraisa. I'm sorry. Most of the Rishonim learn Hamavazas and Ma'adas Ki'ilu Oivir Avodah Zarah is referring to Oisa Malacha B'chal Hamoed. And it's because it could only be because they hold that the Issa Malacha B'chal Hamoed is D'Oraisa. If you hold that the Issa Malacha on Chal Hamoed is D'Rabbanan, Pashtus, Tosfos already says that, you can't say so stark that if a person does Malacha on Chal Hamoed, Eile Chelek L'Olam Haba, Ki'ilu Oivir Avodah Zarah. So what's Taka Yed Pshat? The Rambam, among other Rishonim, hold that the Isser Malacha and Chal Hamoed is already the Rabbanon. So what's Taka Yed Pshat in Hamavazas and Ma'ados? We saw that the Rambam says that it's going on Yom Tif. These Rishonim that learned that Hamavazas and Ma'ados is not talking about doing Malacha, it's talking about the way you eat and you drink on Yom Tov or Chal Hamoed. The Achila and Shtia cannot be like Chol, and if you eat and drink the same way you do b'Chol, that's called Mevazes Hamayados ve'Eile Chelek L'Olam Haba Ki'ilu Oivir Avodah Zarah. Hopefully, Be'ez Hashem, there'll probably be a separate shiur going into the din Sudas Chal Hamoed. That there's no time for it now, But just to bring out, the Rambam learns that it's not talking about Oisa Malacha, even though he's talking about Yom Tif. It's not talking about Oisa Malacha because then it's not Mavaza, it's Machalal. Really, and please listen, understand, if Mavaza doesn't mean Oisa Malacha, Mavaza means what? Ba'achila b'shtiya. Means a person eats Chalamoid Yom Tif like a regular day. You don't have to learn Moyadois to be Yom Tif. Moyadois can actually be Chalamoid. And Chalamoid you have to eat not like a Chol, if not your Mavaza. So then really the Rambam, what you asked in the beginning, the Rambam says all over Moed means Chalamoid. So why does the Rambam have to learn that Moed is talking about Yom Tif, ba'oinig, ba'kavod, ba'achila, b'shtiya? Why couldn't he learn that it's talking about Chalamoid?
Both of them.
Lamaisa, the Rambam says it by Yom Tif. I hear what you're saying, it could have been Koilel, also Chalamoid. In Zichron Shmuel, Rabbi Shmuel Rozovsky says that the Rambam l'shitase, the Rambam holds that Chalamoid, there's no din kavod v'oinig. Meaning to say, Shitas a Rambam, Chalamoid, you can eat, there's no dinim l'fi the Rambam Chalamoid, regular like Choyel. So therefore the Rambam learns Mavazas Ma'adas has to be talking about Yom Tov, Ataka Yotzim and Aklal, and it's al yidei kavod v'oinig. A person is not Machabed Yom Tov, is called Mavazas Ma'adas. However, these other Rishonim that learn that Hamavazas Ma'adas, not like we spoke for the past 20 minutes, that it's talking about Malacha b'Chalamoid, it's talking about Achila v'Shtiya b'Chalamoid. And for that, if a person is oicha v'shoyse Chalamoid like b'choyel, is ein lechelek lo'elam haba v'ki lo'y v'avodah zara. These Rishonim that learn like that. The Rivon in Makis, Rashi only wrote till Daf Chaf. The end of the Mesechta, Rashi was nifty, he didn't finish. So as Eidim, the Rivon finishes. Over there, when it says Amavazas and Ma'adas, the only thing the Rivon says is Chalamoid. Moed means Chalamoid, but he doesn't say what Mavaza is. You can either learn Mavaza means Oisa Malacha, but the Rishonim that learn Rashi and the Rav learn Mavaza means Oichel v'shoyse b'Chalamoid k'may b'choyel. The Mishnah Berurah actually brings this whole discussion in the beginning of Hilchos Chalamoid. What does it mean? Obviously, we're going to get to it be'ez Hashem, but what does it mean? Oichel v'shoyse k'b'choyel. What I could tell you, even just pull out one line in the Sharatzi, and the Sharatzi says, even though Chalamoid, you don't have to sit down Chalamoid to eat a Yom Tov Suda, but Dr. Sharatzi and the Chavetz Chaim says, Hamiyu, Chalamoid has to be different than Chol. Does it need a Suda? Do you need Pas? That we'll speak about. But Al Kapanim, it has to be different than Chol. So to sum up the whole Shiur, Hamavazas Ma'adas Ein Lechelek Lo'elam Haba, is it referring to Oisem Malacha b'Chalamoid? And that's why we should learn stark the halachas of Chalamoid.
Dressing, no?
Very good. I left that out. Yitaka right. Very good. The Mishnah Berurah brings. I'm trying to remember which of the Rishonim say that, but richtig ksus nikiyah, to put a nice clothing on Chalamoid also. The Mishnah Berurah for sure brings it. I don't remember offhand the makor for that, because Rashi and the Rav, I'm almost sure, only say achila v'shtiya. Yeah, Rashi says b'achila v'shti, doesn't bring the Gabi ksus nakiya. The Mishnah Berurah brings it. So we have a oisa malacha b'chalamoyed. Mavazas ma'adas could either mean oisa malacha b'chalamoyed, or it can mean that he's oichel v'shoyse b'chalamoyed kamoy b'choil. And then the Rambam holds that Mavazas ma'adas is actually referring to Yom Tif. And obviously it's not talking about malacha, because for malacha you don't need a Gemara to say Mavazas Ma'adas. That's regular Chil Yom Tif. It's talking about you're not noyig Kovid v'oinig on Yom Tif, and that is what the Mishnah and the Gemara is saying. Have a wonderful Shabbos.